I stood in my small room above the mercantile, buttoning the only decent dress I owned, deep blue wool, mended at the sleeves. Through the window, I could see townspeople gathering at the church hall, their breath clouding in December air. Snow had fallen during the night, turning Cedar Ridge into something almost pretty. Almost. Pretty didn't last long in frontier towns. Neither did hope. Today was the Christmas charity auction. Today, I'd agreed to stand on a platform so the town could build its school. I'd been teaching the children in these cramped quarters for 2 years since arriving in Cedar Ridge. 27 books stacked against one wall, a chalkboard propped on a barrel. Students sitting on whatever they brought crates, stools, their own coats folded for cushions. They deserved better. Deserved a real schoolhouse with windows that didn't rattle and a stove that actually heated. When Reverend Matthews suggested the Bride Auction, a charity event where bachelor bidders would be matched with unmarried women for a year's companionship contract, I was the only woman who agreed. The respectable wives whispered behind gloved hands. The unmarried girls found convenient excuses. But I had nothing left to lose. I'd learned that reputation. Once lost, stays buried. No amount of good deeds resurrects it. So I stopped trying to resurrect mine. I just tried to matter in smaller ways. The children's faces when they learned to read that mattered. The way little Sarah's eyes lit up when she spelled wonderful correctly that mattered. Standing on a platform to be auctioned, that would matter too, if it bought them a proper school. I touched the mended sleeve of my dress. 3 years ago. This dress had been new. I'd worn it to parties in Boston, to the theater, to Sunday dinners with Charles and his family. Before the scandal broke, before Charles chose his family's name over my name, before I became the woman who arrived alone in Cedar Ridge with one trunk and references nobody checked to. Closely, my mother used to say. Keep your chin up. Sophia, they can take everything but your spine. I checked my reflection in the small mirror, pale face. Dark eyes that had forgotten how to expect kindness. Hair pinned severely back. I looked like what I was, a woman who'd stopped hoping for much, beyond survival. The church bell rang. Time. I descended the stairs. Each step counted. 32 steps from my room to the street. I'd counted them 1,000 times. Numbers were safe, predictable. Unlike people. The December cold hit my face as I stepped outside. Mrs. Henderson swept her porch across the street despite the early hour, her eyes sharp with curiosity. I nodded politely. She didn't nod back. Some things never changed. I walked toward the church hall. My boots crunched through snow. 27 paces to the corner, 43 more to the hall entrance. I counted every one. The hall was already crowded. Someone had hung holly garlands and red ribbon, trying to make this cheerful Christmas charity. The words tasted bitter, but the children needed that school. I saw the platform. 3 wooden steps leading up to a raised area where I'd stand, where men would bid, where my value would be measured in dollars and cents. I climbed those 3 steps and kept my spine straight. It was all I had left to keep. The platform creaked beneath my weight. I wondered if they could see me trembling. Reverend Matthews stood beside me, his kind face doing nothing to soften what came next. The crowd settled into expectant silence. I counted faces. 37? No. 38. A man stood in the back near the door, but shadows hid his features. Brothers and sisters, the Reverend began, we gather for a blessed purpose to raise funds for our new schoolhouse. I'd learned a trick during my engagement to Charles. During those awful dinners where his mother would catalog my inadequacies, find something to focus on. Count it, 37 boards in the ceiling, 12 windows, 6 on each side. 8 candles lit along the windowsills. Numbers were safer than faces. Miss Sophia Turner has graciously volunteered. The Reverend continued, graciously, as if I'd had real choices. She's educated, hardworking, excellent with children. A fine companion for any gentleman. I kept my hands still at my sides. My father had taught me that. Show no fear, Sophia. Predators smell fear. He'd meant it about horses. Turned out it applied to people, too. Bidding starts at $50, Reverend Matthews announced. Silence stretched. Someone coughed. Mrs. Henderson whispered something to her husband. More silence. I'd prepared for humiliation. Somehow, the reality still surprised me. It always did. The blacksmith's apprentice, Tommy, barely 20, raised his hand. $75. His voice cracked on dollars. Poor boy. He probably felt obligated. His mother taught Sunday school with me. Reverend Matthews looked hopeful. $75. Do I hear $500? The voice came from the back, deep, certain. The crowd gasped collectively, heads turning. I searched for the speaker and found him the man who'd been standing in shadows near the door. William Garrett. I'd seen him before, twice, maybe 3 times in 2 years. Each time he'd tipped his hat and vanished like smoke. He ran a ranch 20 miles north, came to town only when absolutely necessary. Tall. Weathered in the way frontier men got weathered sun and wind and solitude carved into skin. He didn't meet my eyes. Reverend Matthews blinked. $500, Brother Garrett. That's 500. William's voice left no room for negotiation. The Reverend scanned the crowd. Do I hear, does anyone, but who would counter $500? Most men didn't see that much in 6 months. Tommy the apprentice sat down, red-faced. Sold, Reverend Matthews said finally, wonder in his voice, to William Garrett for $500. My stomach twisted. What kind of man paid $500 for a year's companionship? What kind of man lived alone 20? Miles from town and suddenly bid more than the school even needed. The crowd parted as William walked forward. He moved carefully, like crowds made him nervous. Probably they did. I understood that. Crowds were unpredictable, dangerous in their judgment. He reached the platform and stopped 2 feet away. Respectful distance. That surprised me. Miss Sophia, he said quietly. I forgot how to count. William stood there, hat in his hands, looking everywhere except directly at me. The crowd pressed closer, eager to witness whatever came next. Mrs. Henderson had positioned herself at the front, eyes bright with gossip potential. Then William leaned in slightly and spoke low. Words meant only for me. Miss Sophia, I'll pay the $500 regardless the school needs it, but you're free to leave. I won't force companionship. I stared at him, searched his face for the trap. Men didn't offer freedom. They took it, owned it, bartered it. They didn't give it away for $500 and expect nothing back. Why, the word escaped before I could stop it. His jaw worked. He looked uncomfortable, like honesty cost him something. I'm lonely, but I won't buy a person. That's not right. The word lonely hung between us. I understood lonely. Lonely was my oldest companion. Had been since Charles's family made their choice, and I made mine leaving Boston with my spine straight and my hope packed away. But this man, this William Garrett, was offering me something I hadn't expected. Freedom, choice, the very things the auction was designed to remove. I studied him properly then. 40. Maybe 45. lines around his eyes from squinting at horizons, hands scarred from work, shirt clean but worn, boots repaired more than once. A man who knew how to fix things, how to make do. Dinner. I heard myself say, "Tonight, Christmas dinner. We talk." Then I decide. Something flickered in his eyes. Relief, hope. "Fair enough." He said, "Fair enough." Like this was a business arrangement between equals. Not an auction he'd won. Like my terms mattered. The crowd shifted, murmuring. They expected something different. A kiss, maybe. Or him claiming his prize. But William just nodded and stepped back. Reverend Matthews cleared his throat. "Well, wonderful. The school fund this is wonderful. I could test this. One dinner. If William was lying, if this was some elaborate trick, I'd know. I'd learned to recognize lies in men's eyes, had a doctorate in it. You might say, Charles had taught me well. "I'll come for you at 5, William said. "If that suits, it suits." He turned to leave, and the crowd parted again. I watched him go that careful walk, like he was already regretting exposure to this many people. The door closed behind him, and the noise erupted, everyone talking at once. I stepped down from that platform on my own. Didn't take the Reverend's offered hand. Didn't acknowledge Mrs. Henderson's pointed stare. Didn't explain myself to anyone. Wasn't ready for that. Might never be. Back in my room. I sat on the narrow bed and looked at my hands. They were shaking now. I'd kept them still on the platform. But here, alone, they shook. $500. Freedom offered. A man who said lonely, like he understood what the word really meant. I didn't trust it. Couldn't afford to. But I'd agreed to dinner, to talking, to one evening of possibility before I rebuilt my walls and remembered that hope was a luxury women like me couldn't afford. William arrived at 5 exactly, driving a wagon that had seen better years but was well maintained. He helped me up without presuming, without letting his hands linger. We drove through town in silence while curtains twitched in windows. By tomorrow, every woman in Cedar Ridge would have a theory about us. Let them theorize. I'd stopped caring what they thought somewhere between the auction and now. The 20-mile ride gave me time to observe him. He didn't fill silence with empty talk. Didn't ask prying questions. Just drove. Occasionally pointing out landmarks. That's where the creek floods in spring. Or elk come through those. Trees in winter. His ranch appeared as the sun started setting. Modest house, barn in good repair, split-rail fence that looked hand-built. Everything spoke of a man who worked alone and worked hard. "It's not much," he said, the first hint of uncertainty I'd heard. "It's honest," I replied, and it was no pretense, no false grandeur, just a home built for function. Inside, the fire was already lit. The house was scrupulously clean, not just tidy, but clean in the way of someone who had nothing but time to get things right. A table set for 2. Roast chicken keeping warm on the stove. He'd prepared this before coming to get me. "You cooked," I said. Surprised. "Live alone long enough. You learn." He pulled out a chair for me. "Coffee, please." He poured carefully, asking if I took sugar, cream, small courtesies that felt enormous after 2 years of taking care of myself. I'd forgotten people could be considerate without wanting something in return. We ate in careful conversation. Weather, the town, the school plans, safe topics that revealed nothing, risked nothing. The chicken was good simple, but well seasoned. A man who'd learned to make meals matter even when eating alone. Then I noticed the bookshelf. It dominated one wall, shelves packed tight, Dickens, Austen, Emerson, poetry collections. Technical manuals mixed with novels. I couldn't hide my surprise. "You read Winters Are Long," he said simply. Then, almost defensive, "Mail order. Mostly. Takes months to get books out here, but..." He stopped, shrugged. I stood and walked to the shelf. Ran my fingers along spines. Great Expectations, Emma, Self-Reliance. These weren't decorations. Pages were dog-eared, spines cracked from actual reading. "What are you teaching the children?" he asked. And something in me unlocked. I told him about the students. About Sarah, who'd started the year barely able to write her name and now composed full sentences. About the ranch boys who pretended reading was beneath them, but stayed after lessons to borrow books. About little Michael, whose mother had died and who found comfort in stories about families. William listened. Really listened. Asked questions that showed he understood not just the mechanics of teaching, but why it mattered. "You make them visible," he said finally. "The children, like they matter. They do matter. I know, but not everyone sees it." He poured more coffee. "That's worth $500. Worth more." I studied him across the table. Firelight caught the gray in his hair, the tired lines around his eyes. A man who'd chosen isolation but was honest about its cost. "Why did you really bid?" I asked. "The truth?" He was quiet so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the windows. "Then, I saw you teaching those children outside the mercantile last spring. You were so alive. Present. Like they mattered more than anything." He looked down at his hands. I thought someone like that might understand what it's like to need purpose." My throat tightened. No one had seen me that way in years. Just as damaged goods. The woman with the mysterious past who appeared alone and asked no favors. "And maybe," he continued quietly, "someone like that wouldn't judge a man for being lonely." The word again. Lonely. He said it without shame, like admitting a simple fact. I could keep my walls up, keep my secrets locked. Locked was safer. Locked was what I'd done for 2 years. But sitting there in that firelight. Locked felt unbearable. "I was engaged," I said, "back east. To a man whose family had expectations. When a scandal touched me, not even my fault. Just proximity to the wrong people, he chose his family's reputation over my name." William's face hardened. "That's not a man. That's a coward. I came west with one trunk and teaching references. Started over." I met his eyes. Today, I stood on a platform being auctioned. Part of me wondered if I'd finally become what they whisper I am. "You're not," he said firmly. "What you are is someone who sacrificed pride for children's education. That's not shame. That's strength." Strength. No one had called me strong since Mama died. I'd been foolish, ruined, pitiful, but never strong. The word sat strange in my chest, almost like hope. I didn't trust hope. "Your offer," I said carefully. "Of freedom, does it still stand?" He met my eyes without wavering. "Always." William drove me back to town through snow that had started falling again. At the mercantile door, we sat in the wagon while white flakes caught in lamplight. Neither of us seemed ready to end the evening. "Thank you," I said. "For dinner. For talking." Come back," he said. "Tomorrow. Day after. Whenever you want. No obligations. Just, he stopped, started again. Just company. If you're willing. I should have said no. Should have remembered that wanting led to vulnerability. That vulnerability led to Charles, to humiliation, to platforms and auctions and mended dresses. Tomorrow, I heard myself say, after lessons. His smile transformed his whole face, made him look younger, less alone. I climbed down before I could change my mind, before I could remember all the reasons this was dangerous. That night, I lay awake listening to wind rattle my window, thinking about books and firelight and a man who said lonely, like he understood, who called me strong, who offered freedom and seemed to mean it. When had I started wanting things again the next afternoon, after lessons? I walked the 20 miles to his ranch. It took 4 hours, but I needed the time to think. To prepare arguments for why this was foolish, to rebuild my walls. By the time I arrived, my walls felt paper thin. William was mending fence when I appeared. He looked up, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. You walked. Needed to think. And Hiao, still thinking, he smiled, set down his tools. Come inside. I'll make coffee. We fell into a pattern over the next week. I'd finish lessons and walk to his ranch. We'd talk, sometimes about books, sometimes about nothing, sometimes about the things we didn't say to other people. He told me about choosing isolation after his parents died, how the ranch felt safer than people, how he'd forgotten what conversation felt like until it was gone. I told him about teaching, about missing Boston despite everything, about the children who made Cedar Ridge feel almost like home. We didn't touch, didn't make promises, just talked while the fire burned low and snow fell outside. But something was shifting. I noticed it in small ways. How I started counting the hours until lessons ended. How his smile became something I looked for. How silence between us felt comfortable instead of awkward. How I'd started setting out 2 coffee cups in my room before remembering I lived alone. On the 5th evening, I stayed later than usual. The fire had burned down to embers. William was reading aloud from Emerson something about self-reliance and trusting yourself. His voice was low, steady, safe. I interrupted. Why do you live alone? He closed the book. Fear. Mostly. Of what? Losing people, disappointing them, being disappointed. He looked at the embers. Alone is predictable. Alone doesn't leave. I understood that. Had lived it for 2 years. But alone is also, I searched for words. Alone is dying slowly. Yes. He met my eyes. It is. We sat with that truth between us. 2 people who'd chosen safety over risk. Walls over doors. Survival over living. I'm afraid, I admitted. The words tasted strange. I hadn't said them aloud since leaving Boston. Of wanting this. Of wanting you. Of being hurt again. He finished. Yes. He reached across the space between our chairs. Didn't touch me. Just laid his hand palm up on the armrest. An offer. A choice. I looked at that hand. Scarred. Capable. Patient. I could leave it there. Keep my walls up. Stay safe. Or I could reach back. My hand moved before I decided. Closed over his. His fingers curled gently around mine. I'm afraid too, he said quietly. We sat like that until the fire went cold. 2 broken people holding hands in the dark. Too scared to let go. Too tired of being alone to pull away. I woke the next morning to knocking. Mrs. Henderson stood at my door, lips pursed with purpose. "Miss Turner, might I have a word?" She didn't wait for invitation, just swept inside. Her eyes catalogued everything: the unmade bed, the extra coffee cup I'd set out by habit, the book William had lent me on the table. "The town is talking," she said. "The town is always talking. About you and Mr. Garrett, about the auction, about your evening visits to his ranch." I kept my voice level. "Mr. Garrett and I are friends." Friends. She made the word sound indecent. A single woman spending evenings alone with a bachelor. You understand how this appears. I understand that I'm 28 years old and capable of making my own choices. The Reverend is concerned. The school board is concerned. You're teaching our children. There it was, the threat wrapped in concern. "Mr. Garrett paid $500 for that school," I said carefully. Money the town desperately needed. He asked nothing in return except friendship, which I've freely given. But the contract, which he voided, publicly, he made it clear I owe him nothing. Mrs. Henderson's mouth tightened. "That may be, but appearances matter. If you refuse him now, after his generosity," she let the implication hang. After she left, I sat on my bed shaking. Not from fear, from anger. The same town that had pushed me toward that auction now judged me for the aftermath. The same people who'd been content to auction a woman for charity now whispered about propriety. That afternoon, Reverend Matthews visited. He was kinder than Mrs. Henderson, but no less clear. "The board has questions. Sophia, about your arrangement with Mr. Garrett." "There is no arrangement. We're friends. He paid $500. The town expects me to fulfill an obligation he explicitly released me from." I heard. My voice rising, forced it level. "Tell me, Reverend, what exactly do they expect?" He shifted uncomfortably. I'm not suggesting." He stopped, started again. "His generosity funds the school, but if you refuse his companionship, it appears ungrateful, difficult." I see. I did see. Perfectly. So I should honor a contract that doesn't exist to satisfy town gossip. Not gossip. Concern. Of course. I stood. "Is there anything else?" "Reverend." He left, looking troubled. I felt numb. That evening, William arrived at my door. Someone had told him about the visits, about the pressure. "I'll announce publicly that you're free." He offered immediately, "Make it absolutely clear. No obligation, no contract." "That shames us both," I said wearily. "You, for bidding on something you didn't want. Me, for being unwanted." We stood in my small room, the trap closing around us. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know. The truth? Run? Maybe. Take that teaching position in California I heard about. Start over where no one knows about auctions or scandals." His face went carefully blank. "If that's what you need, what I need," I stopped. What did I need? I need people to stop making my choices for me. I need to stop being afraid. I didn't finish. Couldn't. William waited, patient as always. "I need time," I said finally, "to think, to decide without the town breathing down my neck." "How much time?" "Until New Year's." 3 days. He nodded. 3 days. "Then whatever you decide. I'll support it." He moved toward the door. Stopped. "Sophia, whatever happens, I don't regret bidding. Don't regret knowing you. After he left, I sat in the growing dark, 3 days to decide my future. 3 days to choose between safety and risk. 3 days to figure out if I was brave enough to want something again. 2 days before New Year's, I packed my trunk by candlelight. The California position was real. They needed a teacher willing to start immediately. Small town in the Sierra Nevada. Good pay. A fresh start where no one knew about Boston or Charles or charity auctions. I folded my blue dress carefully. The mended sleeve caught lamplight. This was freedom. I told myself, William's gift to me, the choice to leave. But as I packed, I knew I was lying. I wasn't leaving because I was free. I was leaving because I was terrified. Terrified of the warmth in William's smile, of how his voice sounded, reading Emerson, of conversations by firelight that made me forget to guard my words, of his hand in mine that night, steady and patient. I was falling for William Garrett, and wanting made me vulnerable. Vulnerability had destroyed me once. Charles's family deciding I wasn't good enough. The scandal that wasn't my fault, but became my defining feature. The humiliation of running west alone. Standing on that platform, being auctioned, I couldn't survive that again. Wouldn't. Packing was safer. Running was what I knew. I'd been running since Boston. 2 years in Cedar Ridge, and I'd never unpacked completely. Never let myself believe I'd stay. Because staying meant roots. Roots meant pain when they got torn up. Better to keep moving. The trunk was half full when someone knocked. William stood in the hallway, hat in hands, snow melting on his shoulders. His eyes found the trunk immediately. The mercantile owner said, "You're leaving." I didn't ask how he'd heard. Small towns had no secrets. "It's better," I said. Voice wooden, rehearsed. Clean break. No obligations. No town gossip. "Is that what you want?" He stepped closer. Not touching, never presuming. "Or what you're afraid not to do?" The question hit like a fist. "I don't know the difference anymore," I whispered. He set his hat on my small table, looked at me with those tired, honest eyes. "Sophia, I meant what I said. You're free. But freedom means choosing what you actually want, not just running from what scares you. What if I choose wrong?" The question escaped before I could stop it. What if I stay and you... What if it ends like Charles? What if I'm not enough? What if you don't choose at all?" He said gently. "What if you spend the rest of your life running and never find out what could have been?" I looked at my half-packed trunk, at the life I was preparing to abandon. Again. "I've been running too." William continued. 10 years on that ranch. Told myself it was choice, independence. But it was fear. Fear of losing people. Of being lost. The ranch made you safe. The ranch made me alone. He moved closer, still not touching. "There's a difference between safe and alive." I forgot that. Until I saw you teaching those children. Until you sat in my house and talked about books like they mattered. Until... He stopped. Tried again. Until I remembered what wanting felt like. And yes, it's terrifying. Yes, you could leave. Could decide I'm not enough. Could break my heart. His voice cracked. "But Sophia, I'd rather risk that than spend another 10 years alone pretending I chose it." I stood there with my half-packed trunk between us. The future balanced on what I'd say next. But I couldn't say it. Not yet. Couldn't promise anything beyond my own fear. "Come back tomorrow," I whispered. "New Year's Eve, after the watch night service, I'll have my answer." And if your answer is California, I met his eyes, then I'll tell you goodbye properly. You deserve that. He picked up his hat, moved to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. Whatever you decide, I meant it. I don't regret knowing you. After he left, I sat with my trunk and my fear and my candle burning low. I'd spent 2 years believing choice meant saying no, protecting myself, building walls so high nothing could reach me. But what if choice could also mean yes? What if I could say yes to warmth, yes to conversations, yes to someone who saw my strength instead of my shame? What if I was brave enough just once to risk wanting? Something the candle flickered. Tomorrow, I'd decide tonight. I sat with possibility. New Year's Eve. I didn't attend the watch night service at church. Couldn't face the questions, the stares, Mrs. Henderson's pointed concern. Instead, I stayed in my room with paper and pencil. I wrote 2 lists: fear's rejection, loss, becoming obligated, losing myself, being hurt, standing on platforms, running again, never being enough. Wants warmth, being seen, conversations that matter, laughter, books by firelight, coffee for 2, someone who calls me strong, partnership, choice, hope. The wants list was longer. When had that happened? I stared at those words. Partnership, choice, hope. For 2 years, I'd believed hope was luxury, something women like me scarred, scandalized, alone couldn't afford. But maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe hope wasn't luxury. Maybe it was necessity. Maybe without it, I was just surviving. And surviving wasn't the same as living. I wrote one more question at the bottom. What do I actually want? The answer came clear and simple. Wanted William. Wanted his steady presence, his honest words, the way he listened, like I mattered, how he'd offered freedom and meant it, how he called loneliness by its name without shame. I wanted the life we could build, not rescue, not obligation, partnership. I wanted to choose, not run, not hide, choose. Church bells rang midnight. New Year's Day, beginning. William knocked 5 minutes later. I opened the door. He stood there, snow on his shoulders again, eyes uncertain, but hopeful. Your offer, I said steadily, of freedom. Does it still stand always? He said, same answer as before. Constant. Then I'm choosing to accept it, not the obligation the town expects. Your real offer, companionship, freely given, partnership. I took a breath. If you're willing, understanding dawned in his eyes. You're sure? I'm choosing, I corrected. That's different than sure. But it's mine. My choice. I extended my hand. Not to be helped. To shake on an agreement between equals. He took it. His smile transformed his whole face. Joy replacing loneliness. Possibility replacing resignation. Marry me, he said. I blinked. That's fast. We can wait if you want. But Sophia, I don't want people whispering you're fulfilling a contract. I want them knowing you chose me, freely, deliberately. He squeezed my hand gently. Marry me New Year's Day. Start the year with choice, not obligation. And suddenly I saw it. Marriage not as trap, but as declaration. Public proof of my agency, of both our agencies. Yes, I said. Laughed. The sound startled me, free and genuine. Yes, New Year's Day. We married at noon at Reverend Matthews's house. He seemed relieved. Like this solved all the town's concerns. Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was signing my name in the register. Mrs. Sophia Garrett. Steady hand, clear choice. What mattered was William's hand in mine, not pulling me anywhere, just holding steady. What mattered was the future we were choosing. Together, deliberately. That evening, we sat by the fire in his ranch house, our ranch house now. My books already on the shelf beside his. My coat hanging by the door. Scared, William asked. Terrified, I admitted. You, absolutely. We sat with that honesty. Two people brave enough to be afraid together. But here's what I know, I said slowly. I've been safe before. Safe felt like dying. This, I gestured between us. This feels like living, even if it's scary. Especially because it's scary. I leaned against his shoulder. My mother used to say, courage isn't not being afraid. It's doing the thing while afraid. I'd forgotten that. His arm came around me. Careful, respectful, warm. We'll do it together. He said, the scary parts. The living parts, all of it. Together, I agreed. Later, much later, I stood at the window watching snowfall. William was banking the fire, getting ready for bed. Our bed now, our life. I thought about that platform. About standing there feeling every eye on me. About counting ceiling beams to survive. But it had led here. To warmth, to partnership, to a man who'd paid $500 not to own me, but to free me. Sometimes the worst moments led to the best choices. Coffee in the morning, William asked from behind me. I turned, smiled. 2 cups, 2 cups. He agreed. 5 years later, I still teach in the schoolhouse William's $500 built. 23 students this year. Their voices fill the space I once tried to create in cramped quarters above the mercantile. We have proper desks now, windows that don't rattle, a stove that actually heats. Sarah, who could barely write her name that first year, helps teach the younger children. She's 14 now, confident, smart, already talking about normal school, becoming a teacher herself. The ranch boys still pretend reading is beneath them, still stay after lessons to borrow books. When I walk through town, I'm not the scandal anymore, not the auctioned woman. I'm Mrs. Garrett, the teacher, the woman who chose. Mrs. Henderson still watches with sharp eyes. But last Christmas, at the church social, she remarked that our marriage was unusual but clearly successful. From her, that's practically effusive praise. William and I found our rhythm. Winter evenings by the fire with books. Summer mornings watching sunrise from the porch. The comfortable silence of people who don't need to fill every space with words. We had our struggles. Learning to trust. To stay instead of run. To believe the other wouldn't leave. That first year, I packed my trunk 3 times during arguments. Never left. But the packing reflex took time to unlearn. William had his own patterns. Retreating to silence when overwhelmed. Spending days alone with cattle when emotions ran too high. We learned to navigate those moments. To give space while staying connected. We built something real. Not perfect. Not the fairy tale the town whispers about sometimes. But ours. Honest. Chosen. Last month, William added shelves to the house for my growing book collection. We're running out of wall space. He says we'll build an addition. I say we need to stop buying books. We'll do neither. We'll keep collecting words and stories. Keep building our life piece by piece. But the moment I return to most often is that New Year's Eve, standing in my room with lists of fears and wants. asking myself what I actually desired, not what seemed safe or what I thought I deserved. The answer had been simple. I wanted more than survival. Wanted warmth, partnership, intellectual companionship. Wanted to trust that a man who offered freedom meant it. He did mean it. Still does. Every day, in 100 small ways, William reminds me I chose this. I choose him. I choose us. Not because I was rescued, not because I was obligated, because I decided to risk wanting something. To believe I deserved more than just surviving. Last week, I stood on the school's platform, the one William's money built, helping students with a geography lesson. Sarah noticed me pause, asked if I was all right. Just remembering. I told her, remembering what? I looked at those 23 faces, at the solid walls and good stove, at the life I'd built from that awful Christmas auction, that sometimes the hardest moments lead to the best choices. I said, if you're brave enough to choose. This morning, like every morning, I poured 2 cups of coffee, set them on the table while William built up the fire, watched steam rise from both cups. I used to set out only one, convinced myself I preferred it that way. That alone was safer, simpler, better. I'd been lying. 2 cups meant partnership, meant warmth across the table, meant someone who saw my strength and called it by name. 2 cups meant I'd stopped running long enough to build something. William came to the table, kissed the top of my head in passing, settled into his chair with the easy comfort of 5 years together. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I wrapped my hands around my cup, let the warmth seep into my palms. That I'm glad I stayed. Me too. Simple words, but they held everything. All the fear we'd faced, all the choices we'd made, all the mornings we'd woken up and chosen again. Outside. Snow was falling. Inside. The fire crackled. Coffee steamed. Books lined the walls. I'd spent 2 years protecting my heart, building walls so high nothing could reach me. I'd forgotten hearts were meant to be used. More coffee, William asked. I smiled, held out my cup. Always, and every morning, when I pour 2 cups of coffee instead of 1, I remember this is what freedom looks like. Not the absence of obligation, the presence of choice. My choice, daily, forever.